I was on my way home from working a graveyard shift on Christmas Eve night. It was a snowy night. The roads were icy and slippery. I was driving slow and cautious, listening to Christmas music. There were next to no cars on the road at all, just the occasional snowplow truck. I was on a quiet service road when I came to a red light. There were 2 cars in front of me. The light quickly turned green, but the cars didn't move. I'm not the type to honk if ever, but after 30 seconds of neither of the cars moving, I finally tapped on the horn. Still, nothing. The car in front of me wasn't even honking at the car in front of him. Another 20 seconds passed, and I honked again. I noticed someone on the sidewalk watching this happen. I thought he must be thinking, "What an asshole who's ever in the front car." We were sitting there so long now, and the light changed to red again. Like I said, I'm not the type to honk, so I'm definitely not the type to get out of my car and confront someone. But this was too much. I was exhausted and wanted to go home. I got out of my car and walked over to the car in front of me, which for the record was still on. Both of them were actually. When I knocked on the window and looked inside, the car was empty. I walked to the car in front of it, and it was empty too. There was no way to explain this. 2 running cars blocking the lane. No one inside either of them, no signs of an accident or anything. I was ready to ask that guy on the sidewalk if one of these cars were his, but when I looked in the direction where he was standing, he wasn't there anymore. The light turned green. I thought to myself, okay, whatever. I was gonna drive around them on the opposite side of the road and be gone, so that's what I did. I was way too unsettled to stick around there. A few blocks down, I saw a cop car parked in an empty parking lot. Unfortunately, I missed the entrance, so I started honking my horn and flashing my lights to get his attention, and it worked. He turned his car on and exited the parking lot to pull up behind me on the road. It felt like he was pulling me over, kind of, because he exited his car to walk up to mine. I didn't leave my car as a respect thing, I guess. I lowered my window and told him about the 2 weird abandoned cars back there and how they were obstructing traffic. He thanked me and said he'd check it out. Then his attention turned to something in the back seat and he said,
"Why is he laying on the floor like that?"
"What?" I said. I turned around and saw a hooded man laying on the floor of my car. I screamed in front of the cop. I stepped out and yelled at the cop that I didn't know him. The cop drew his gun and ordered the guy to step out with his hands raised. He did so. When the man was in handcuffs, I recognized him as the guy standing on the side of the road, so I told the cop. The cop called for backup. He shook my hand and told me he'd take care of the rest and to get home safe. We wished each other a Merry Christmas. I drove home with a mix of emotions, but that Christmas, all I know is that I had newfound appreciation for police officers. My immediate family always hosted the Christmas when I was younger. At the time, we lived on the upper level of a 2-story family house. My parents owned the house and rented the bottom floor out to multiple tenants throughout the years. Christmas time of 2012, a new tenant had just moved in downstairs. It was a quiet-seeming 30-something-year-old male, and quiet was the kind of tenant my parents were looking for. Unfortunately, a few days into him moving in downstairs, there would be a lot of noises at all hours of the night. For example, the front door would open and shut numerous times throughout the night, and sometimes there would be loud talking, in some instances yelling. My dad went downstairs one night to see what the commotion was and to ask him to keep the noise down. That was the start of my dad's suspicions about that guy downstairs. Fast forward to Christmas Eve night. We had the whole family over, dining room table stretched out with all 20 seats taken. My Uncle Jake is a heavy smoker, so he goes outside to smoke several times throughout the night. After our main course, Uncle Jake went outside for yet another smoke. He mistakenly left his phone on the table, however, when it rang a few times after he went outside. My dad ordered me to go run his phone to him, so I grabbed his phone and ran it down the stairs. Before I went out the front door, I stopped to notice the back door was open. See, when you walk into the house, there is a little hallway with 3 doors. One door which led to the downstairs apartment, the front door, and then a hallway that stretched to the back door. The back door was open, so I figured my uncle went out back. The phone was still ringing, so I hurried to the backyard to find my uncle, but he didn't seem to be back there. Just when I was about to give up, I heard someone in the shed, and the shed door was open. I called for my uncle, and someone came out of the shed. It was too dark to see him, but I was pretty sure it was my uncle. He started walking over to me fast. At first I assumed because he wanted to answer his phone in time, but when he got close enough to the lights from inside of the house, I could see his face. It wasn't my uncle, but rather the tenant from downstairs. For some reason, the way he was approaching me I found intimidating, so I turned and ran for the door. I slammed it in that man's face and went to the front yard where I found my Uncle Jake smoking. I stood by him and told him about the downstairs tenant and how he seemingly just charged at me. My uncle is the kind of guy to not really take things I say seriously, or he's just not that kind of person to confront someone. I stayed with him until he finished his smoke because I was uncomfortable. Then we walked back upstairs to the dinner table, where I told my dad about the tenant in the shed and how he followed me. There was a silence at the table. My dad seemed a little concerned, but I guess he didn't want to ruin the remainder of our Christmas dinner, so he waited until we were done to check outside. When he came back up, he said the neighbor wouldn't answer his door, but that the shed outside was shut. A couple of hours later, the last of our family left, and my immediate family started getting ready for bed. I stayed up in the living room by the fire and the tree because I liked the lighting the two gave off. I watched the Christmas movie. I guess I nodded off at some point while watching it. However, I do remember waking up suddenly and hearing a creaking on the stairs. I was too tired to move from my laying position. Plus, I assumed it was just my mom, dad, or sister. Not to mention, our giant Christmas tree blocked my view of the stairs. We had all carpeted floors upstairs, so I couldn't hear whoever was roaming around. But I heard the door down the hall open, probably my sister going back to bed. Now the fire seemed to be almost dead, and the movie I was watching was over. The clock under the TV read 1 in the morning. I figured I'd just stay on the couch at that point because I was so comfortable. A few minutes later, I heard something rustling by the tree. It sounded like an ornament fell off of it. Someone had definitely walked into it. I flipped on my side and looked at the tree, but it was as still as it always was. I flipped back on my other side, eyes still open, and saw a man standing over me, bending slightly. Of course, initially, my first reaction was to scream. My second reaction was to analyze the face to see if it was my father. And when I realized it wasn't my father, rather the downstairs tenant, I screamed even louder. The man tried to cover my mouth, but at that point, I think he realized it was too late. Everyone heard me. He ran for the stairs just as my dad stormed out of his room. My dad chased after him, but he was already driving down the street. I think when he was standing over me, he was making sure I was asleep before robbing the place or something. Fortunately for us, my parents had copies of his ID and other important information which my parents used to find him and sue him for breaking and entering, and we won the case in a landslide. But don't let that take away from the fact that it was still an insanely crazy thing to go through. During the holiday season of last year, I took a trip to visit my older sister. With every room already claimed by my other family members, I found myself sleeping on the living room couch. Our nightly routine involved gathering for a movie in the living room before everyone went to bed for the night. My niece had a cot set up that she would use to relax and eventually fall asleep. Then my sister would carry her to her bedroom when it was time for bed. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to use the restroom and saw my younger sister fast asleep on the carpet beside me. To my surprise, my niece was also in the living room in her cot. That was strange since my older sister usually carried her to the bedroom before turning in for the night. I did not think much of it and decided to make a quick trip to the restroom. Upon returning just a minute later, I found it odd that the cot was empty. I assumed my niece might have heard me getting up and went to my sister's room. The following morning, I inquired to my sister on why she had left my niece to sleep in the living room. My sister appeared confused, insisting she had carried her to bed as usual like she has done every night since I arrived. I vividly recall seeing my niece in her cot during my 3 a.m. awakening, and doing a double take because I found it odd that she was still out there with me. This had left me wondering, did I see a ghost? This bizarre series of events persisted throughout my visit. I even attempted to take pictures of my niece sleeping in her cot during the night, but every morning when I showed them to my sister, they were just black pictures capturing nothing but darkness. The next night, my curiosity got the best of me. I couldn't sleep easily, so I decided to set up my phone camera to record my sister's cot. I wanted to capture any evidence of her coming or leaving her cot and roaming around the house at night. I waited for a while, but then I fell asleep. As I reviewed the footage in the morning, I was startled to see that the video turned black just when a shadow showed up heading towards the cot. A few minutes later, the camera turns back on recording an empty cot and the shadow leaving. It was as if the camera had malfunctioned at precisely the moment that shadow, assumedly my niece's, entered and left the frame. I started to doubt my own sanity. I questioned whether I was imagining things or if there was something truly strange happening in that house. I shared my experiences with my family, but they dismissed my concerns as mere coincidence or overreactive imagination. Now Christmas is around the corner, and I'm kinda terrified to go through the same experience again.